I was kneeling in a frozen wasteland in Kansas beneath a full moon, with a gun pointed to my head, a man saying he'd blow my brains out. I suppose in addressing the future of regulation, we should talk about the fact that psilocybin, for example, is very much thoroughly regulated, as are all psychedelics, since the control of LSD on October 24th, 1968, in the ensuing dark decades since then. A little bio, 21 years ago, on November 6, 2000, I was kneeling in a frozen wasteland in Kansas beneath a full moon, with a gun pointed to my head, a man saying he'd blow my brains out, for allegedly producing LSD. At that point, I was incarcerated with 2 life sentences without possibility of parole for 20 years. Released under compassionate release perhaps a year ago, and entering this blessed world, and to see the remarkable transformations that you all are bringing so beautifully. And it's a privilege to see you here this morning. And I thank you from my deepest heart. I worry about exceeding time. We only have about 6 minutes each. Each of us could fill the entire 40 minutes. Some of you may want to know about what the prison years were like. I'll address that briefly. I was in a maximum security institution every day for the last 20 years, thinking I would die there. 1,000 motions were, literally 1,000 motions were written and filed, all failed, except the last one. Gun towers, 30-foot walls, no plants, no flowers, no children, no dogs, no cats, no grass. 1,800 men, gangs, stabbings, countless stabbings, men in blood crews mopping up blood, killings, suicides. The most violent non-war zone in the Western world. And from that to emerge into this lovely space has been quite a transition. But on the basis of that, I can speak to the transformations in the 60s, and so I'll give you a little history. During the first large-scale illicit deployments, recognizing that 99% of all people here who have had psychedelics such as LSD had it from an illicit source. And that's always been the case, but perhaps no more. The first large labs were those of, Augustus Stanley Owsley III, Bear Owsley, who did, over his lifetime, 400 grams. That's perhaps 1 million doses. Deployed in 1966-67 in the Bay Area and then throughout the United States. Hence the song, if you're visiting San Francisco, wear flowers in your hair, great migration of youth to San Francisco. That was followed by the remarkable work of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, an international LSD distribution group, with the clandestine laboratories of Nick Sand and Tim Scully. Nick passed away a few years ago, was honored at a MAPS conference in Oakland. Nicky did perhaps 13 kilos in his lifetime. That's 130 million doses. Of course, since the 70s and 80s, things became quite more sophisticated synthetically, so that underground labs grew larger and larger. And it's not uncommon these days, since the underground does continue, that labs produce 10 million doses a month. And that's going on right now as we sit here and try to figure out how to deregulate. But there's a future as well as a past. And the question is, how shall we proceed to rescheduling psilocybin to Schedule 3. I defer entirely to my distinguished colleague, Ms. Labasani, who will advise you on her great work in DC in terms of assembling a psychedelic caucus among congressmen to hold this floor. I think that the issues that I see in the venture space, and I'll wrap this in just a moment, that I see as difficult before us, is that in the next 2 years, we'll have numerous clinical trials concluding. Some of these clinical trials will not prove out in the sense of FDA ultimately approving them. There'll be many mergers and acquisitions. Perhaps 80% of the field will merge or disappear, but those that remain standing will have generated new and quite wonderful healing substances. And for that alone, we must continue our focus, our brave heart, and our good work. Thank you.